Welcome to the University of Guelph Arboretum. My name is Kitty, and behind the camera there, that's Jenny.
Hello!
And we are both the Naturalist Interns here at the Arboretum. Now, if you haven't been to the Arboretum before, you're a little bit newer to this word. What an Arboretum means is essentially, I like to describe it as kind of like a museum for trees. So here in this beautiful green space, we have trees that are native to Ontario. We have trees that are from all the way across the world. We have some very common trees, and we have some rare, even endangered trees as well. So it has all these different trees from all different sorts of places, just like kind of like a museum. And here, because there's so many different habitats, we also have a lot of animals, a lot of critters that make this space their home. But sometimes it can be really, really hard to find these animals out there. A lot of the wildlife don't want to be seen. Luckily for us though, sometimes they leave clues behind. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna bring you on a walk with us. If you're watching at home, you wanna add a little bit more nature fun into your life, we're gonna bring you on a walk with us. We're gonna try to find some of these animal signs and try to figure out what animals might be living near us. Now we're here in Victoria Woods, which is one of the old growth forests here at the Arboretum. Some of these trees are over 100 years old. But out of all these beautiful trees, I'm gonna bring you to my favorite tree in this entire forest. So come on, follow me. All right. Now, it may not be that much of a looker at first, but this is my favorite tree in the entirety of Victoria Woods.
Ooh.
And at first, you might be a little bit confused, but I promise you it gets really good, all right? The reason that this is my favorite tree is because it has a lot of different animal signs on it. And some of the things that we can use and what I like to use to help me figure out what I'm looking at are biodiversity sheets that the University of Guelph Arboretum makes. So they come in lots of different topics. I'm using one here called Animal Signs in Your Neighborhood, full of pictures of different animal signs. We can use this to identify what we're taking a look at out in nature. If you are interested in getting one of these, you can order it on our website. But we're going to use this and we're going to take a closer look at this tree. So come on over. So right off the bat, the thing I noticed first and foremost are these giant holes. It's kind of hard to miss these giant holes all over the trunk of the tree. Now, if we take a look at our placemat here, it looks a little bit like this. Pileated woodpecker feeding holes. So these giant holes are actually made by a bird called a pileated woodpecker, which is the biggest woodpecker we have in all of Ontario. They're giant, beautiful birds, black and white with a red crest on top of their head, and they have these giant beaks that they're going to use to drill these holes right into trees. They make these giant, almost rectangular shaped holes. And what they're looking for inside these holes is food. They love to eat tiny little insects living inside these trees. So they'll peck these holes into the tree, and they'll use their specialized tongue to stick inside these holes and scoop out insects to eat. And especially for pileated woodpeckers, they love to eat carpenter ants. That's their favorite snack. Now, they are very, very obvious animal signs, but if you take a little bit of a closer look at this trunk here, you might notice there's these little indentations all over the side of the tree. Now, it looks a little bit curious at first, not sure what made those, but again, if you take a look at our biodiversity sheet here, let's see what it most resembles. I think it looks a lot like beetle larva tunnels. So what happens is we have these types of beetles that live here called wood-boring beetles. There's a whole family of beetles, including lots of different species. And what they do is they'll fly around and find a perfect tree, kind of like this perfect tree right here. Once upon a time when this is living, maybe. And what they'll do is these beetles, they'll lay eggs inside the tree, underneath the bark of the tree, and this egg, it'll hatch into a larva, this little baby beetle, and this little baby beetle is gonna eat the wood on the inside of the tree. It's gonna eat and eat and eat and grow and grow and grow. But of course, as it's eating, it's making these tunnels into the wood that we can see here. And once it's eaten enough, it's eaten its fill and it's grown big enough, then it's ready to undergo a metamorphosis, so transform into an adult beetle that we're used to seeing, and it'll come out of the wood here by chewing these little holes. You can see all over the tree there's these perfectly circular holes. These are from the beetles chewing their way out of the tree. And once they come out of these holes, they'll fly around, they'll mate, and they'll find another perfect tree to begin the cycle all over again. So this is another animal sign right here on this tree, and these are from beetle larvae tunnels. That's pretty awesome. Now we got 2 signs so far, which is not too shabby, but I think there is one sign on this tree that most people don't think of, and that is what happened right over here. Now, no wild animal made this straight clear cut over this tree here on this tree trunk. This was actually cut down by a human being. So the last animal sign we're going to talk about is the signs left behind by human beings. And when we think about things like this, we want to be really mindful of when you're out in nature, you sometimes can leave a mark on the environment, and you want to make sure that the mark you leave is a positive one. And that could be something really big, like conserving a big open habitat like this, or I guess a big wooded forested area like this. Preserving different types of habitats can be really important in protecting the plants that live here and the animals that live here. But sometimes you can do something a little bit smaller as well in your everyday life. Something as simple as maybe taking shorter showers to conserve water, or reducing the amount of waste you create, or not littering. All those things can go a big way in protecting the big, beautiful natural space that we live in, which is pretty awesome. Now, of course, we're not going to stay right here in the Victoria Woods to look for animal signs. We're going to go all over the place in the Arboretum. So why don't we pass it off to Jenny, and we can follow her to see what she can find. It's true, because you know what? Big natural spaces like this are full of animal signs, which is really awesome. But critters are pretty adaptive, and you can find some pretty cool animal signs in pretty kind of urban places too, places where people are living. So for our next animal find, if you guys want to follow me, we're going to actually head on over to our nature center, this nice little house we have for programming, and we're going to look at some animal signs that animals have left behind there, which will be kind of cool. It's a nice, beautiful day at the Arboretum today too, so it's awesome to be getting out and going for a walk to look at different things. Alright, well, here we are at our very lovely nature center wall. And you know what? Just like the stuff that we started at first, it may not look like much, but there are some pretty neat things going on right over here. Like, if you guys take a closer look, can you see any animal signs right off the bat off of this wall? What do you think?
I think I see something right there
Yeah,
on the wall.
that's pretty awesome. That's one of the most common urban animal signs that you may find even at your own home, so definitely have a look around. And we have a look at our biodiversity sheet. Does anything stand out that matches? Because I'm thinking this looks a lot like an organ pipe mud dauber nest. And these guys are really cool. These guys are wasps, and they're called organ pipe mud daubers because they make these kind of organ-like pipes on walls. So what it does is this wasp, it really likes areas that have really good soil for it, so nice and sandy, maybe a little muddy. And a female mud dauber, she's gonna fly around till she finds a perfect habitat with the soil for her. And she's gonna collect the soil, she's gonna hold it in her little mouth, and she's gonna carry it somewhere that she thinks is a good place to make a pipe. And then she'll take this mud and she'll smash it against the wall, and she'll go back, collect more mud, and keep coming back and smashing these little balls of mud until she has these perfect little tubes of mud, these organ pipes. And what she's gonna do is she's gonna use these organ pipes as basically a nursery for her babies. But you know, she's a good mom, so she doesn't want her babies to go hungry. So what happens next is she's gonna go fly around and she's gonna look for prey. And organ pipe mud daubers, they actually specialize in spiders. So if you don't like spiders, though why wouldn't you? They're super cool. But if you don't and you're a little weary of them, these are the perfect insects for you. Because these guys are gonna prowl around, they're gonna scope out the area, and they find the perfect, nice, juicy spider. And they're gonna fly over and they're gonna sting the spider, but not to kill. See, when they sting the spider, it's actually paralyzing it, but keeping it alive. So what she can do next is she can take the spider and she'll fly back over to her organ pipe, her little nest, and she'll stick it inside, and then she'll lay a single egg inside that pipe along with that spider and seal it up. So inside that pipe, you have this little wasp egg. It's gonna hatch into a little larvae, and it has right inside its little nest its own living fresh food source that's been paralyzed by the mother. So this baby's inside there, he's eating away, growing and growing and growing until he becomes an adult. And then he chews his way out of the organ pipe and it breaks free, and the whole cycle kind of starts over again. Now we have this new wasp, and if it's a girl, it's gonna mate and it's gonna fly around looking for another habitat to build more of these pipes, lay more eggs, catch more spiders, which I think is pretty cool. It may be a little bit gruesome for the spider, but that's nature at work, and that's a pretty neat adaptation, I think. And you know what? We don't just stop here with the animal science, because we do have one last stop that I want to visit to look for another animal sign that might be around. Because in the Arboretum, not only do we have these beautiful forests and this kind of neat little interpretive center, this urban area for some critters that might like more urban spaces, but we also have some nice open fields. And one of the things in the fields that I like to look through are kind of these bunches of goldenrod. The goldenrod is this flower, and there's a lot of critters that depend on it, especially in the summer. It's a good source of energy for a lot of animals that eat it. But in the winter, it houses another special little critter that we're going to look for, or signs of, when we're exploring the Arboretum today. All right, so here's a nice open field. There's lots of goldenrod around. So why don't we have a look around and see if we can find what I'm looking for is a little lump in the stem of a goldenrod. So see if we can find some lumpy goldenrods. All right, we're looking for some lumpy goldenrods. Do you guys see anything in this field? Gotta look close. We'll keep looking. I know they're around for sure. And when we find one, it's a pretty little neat treasure to learn a little more about. Looking close. Maybe we'll look on the other side of the path. Right over here. Nothing yet. Nothing. It remains elusive. So we'll give it another look. See if we can find it. You might hear some blue jays calling in the background. That's pretty neat. Oh, we got one! Success! All right. So here's what I mean if you weren't sure before, what I meant by a lumpy goldenrod. So there's, in the stem, you see this huge ball of plant tissue. It's like a big lump. And this is called a gall. And you see here on our biodiversity sheet, you can kind of match it to this, a goldenrod ball gall. And what this is likely made from is this funny little insect called a goldenrod gallfly. And what this insect does is, like, if you imagine a little fly, a little female fly, and it's flying around doing its fly business, and it's looking for the perfect goldenrod. So what it does is maybe it flies over a nice open field like this, it sees all this goldenrod, and it finds the perfect one, and it thinks, oh well, I'm gonna lay my eggs here because this is a perfect place for it. So what she's gonna do is she's gonna take this nice long tube called the ovipositor. She's gonna stick it in the stem of a goldenrod and she's gonna lay a single egg inside. And that egg hatches into a little larvae, a little grub on the inside of the stem, and it's gonna eat its way through the plant. So it's chewing, eating, and chewing and eating. And the damage done to this plant, and also the saliva from this goldenrod gallfly larva, it stimulates the plant to create all this extra plant tissue, this big kind of ball forms around this little grub, this little larva, because the plant's kind of trying to wall this weird foreign thing inside of it. So that's how you get this big gall, this big lump in a plant. And this is really good for this larvae because it wants this. This is now a nice protective little shelter for the larvae. And it goes inside this gall and it chews itself a little chamber inside its own little room, and it keeps chewing, and it may even chew itself a little hallway to the edge of the gall, but not quite all the way through because it wants to stay protected inside, but it'll chew a little hallway all the way to the edge and then go back inside the little room it made for itself right in the middle. And it's gonna continue to eat and grow and eat and grow and get bigger and bigger until the temperatures start to drop. Fall hits, winter's coming. This fly, this larvae, all of a sudden has to start to prepare to overwinter inside its skull. And this is the really cool part because this larvae, it freezes for the winter. It actually freezes solid, and that's how it overwinters. And that's kind of a funny thing to think about because, humans, we can't survive freezing. If we freeze, bad things are gonna happen. But this larvae has some adaptations that lets it survive freezing. See, what happens is if cells freeze, ice crystals form from inside the cell, and it basically punctures the cell walls and all the organelles, all that important stuff, and it damages all the tissue so the animal can't live anymore. But this gallfly, as the temperature starts to drop, it starts to produce a lot of sugars in its body. And all these sugars kind of concentrate inside the cells and acts kind of like an antifreeze. It keeps these ice crystals from bursting through the cells, and it means that it freezes without any major damage to its body. So it freezes inside this gall and it stays alive through winter, frozen solid. In the spring, as things start to thaw, it starts to thaw too. It starts to warm up, it unfreezes, it thaws out, and it starts to grow some more, and it eventually metamorphosizes into this full-fledged adult fly. It's not a larvae anymore, and now it's ready to leave its gall and go out in the world, do more important fly things. So it kind of goes out of its little room in the center of the gall. It follows its hallway all the way to the edge, but then it has a bit of a problem. You remember that the gall wasn't chewed all the way out to the end. It left a little wall against the outside. And this adult fly doesn't have the chewing mouth parts of its larvae counterpart. It can't chew its way through the last little wall. So what it does is it has a special pouch on top of its head, and it pushes its head against the edge of this wall, and it fills this pouch with hemolymph. It's bug insect version of blood, essentially. And this pouch bulges out and basically explodes out the end of this wall, and now it can escape this gall and fly out and do its fly business. Maybe if it's a female, fly another goldenrod to lay its egg and then create another gall, which is kind of neat. And you can notice that sometimes these galls are eaten out. So this gall, because the larvae is full of sugars in the winter, it's a really nutritious protein-filled snack. Birds, things like woodpeckers maybe, might come and eat out the larvae. So it might peck it open and chew it open. And that's exactly what's happened here. You can see on the inside, that's where the chamber where the larvae was. So that's kind of a really neat goldenrod, kind of fine here in the Arboretum. And so you'll see all over natural spaces, even if you're in a field or a forest, or maybe just in your own home, you may find signs of wildlife or critters around, even though you may not see them exactly. So definitely in this kind of social isolation period, definitely go out and see what you can find by yourself and enjoy nature, even if you maybe aren't close to any big major parks or anything like that. So that's it for today's video, but thank you guys so much for joining us here at the Arboretum and getting to learn a little bit more about some animal science. Bye!